Hey guys, thank you so much for stopping by. My name is Hollabec, and today I thought I would share with you my home buying experience and hopefully help you guys out a little bit. So Jordan and I were first-time home buyers, so all of my tips and tricks are going to be for first-time buyers, so past that I can't help you guys, sorry. So the very first thing that you want to do if you're tossing around the idea of buying a house is to check out the market. Now, if you can wait for the market to change in your favor, then absolutely do. If not, it's not a big deal. Jordan and I bought during a seller's market, which basically means that there were more buyers than there were sellers, which makes it harder for buyers. So it's not impossible, it'll just make the process a lot more stressful. So if you can wait, wait. The next thing you need to do is figure out how much house you can afford. This is so important for you to figure out personally because the pre-approval that you get through your lender is almost always more than what you can comfortably afford. For Jordan and myself, it was like $30,000 more than what we were comfortable paying. So first figure out your budget and what you can comfortably afford as far as payment amounts, and then from there, once you have an idea of the amount of payment that you can afford, your lender will usually help you then figure out, along with current interest rates and whatever else, the price range that you're looking for. And that leads to the third thing that you want to take care of before you start this whole process, and that is figuring out what lender that you want to go to. So even though your primary financial institution may be more convenient for you, that's not always the best option. So you want to shop around and find out who is going to benefit you the most. And along that same idea, you also want to start thinking about what kind of loan is going to work best for your situation. And this will also change too once you start looking at different houses and seeing what kind of loan is going to work best for that house. So when Jordan and I first started looking, we were actually looking at getting a rural development loan. In the end, that ended up changing, which I will talk about later. But we went into it expecting to do rural development, and that also kind of shaped then the houses that we looked at and the areas that we looked at because they are very particular. So those are the three pre-things that you want to do. And then to actually get the ball rolling, the very first thing that you want to do is find a good realtor, specifically a buyer's agent who is going to be on your side during this whole process. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to find yourself a good realtor. Buying a home is already so incredibly stressful, and having someone on your side 24/7 who walks you through the process, especially if you're a first-time buyer, it is just so incredibly important. I don't think we would have been able to do it without the realtor that we had. She was right there on our side through the whole process, making sure that we were talking to the people that we needed to talk to and fill out the forms that we needed to fill out. And she had so many recommendations for different surveyors and inspectors, and we actually went through the title agency affiliated with her brokerage. So it's just so important to find yourself a good buyer's agent. And this may be common knowledge, maybe not, because I wasn't 100% on it. So if you're a first-time buyer, you may not be either, but you do not pay your realtor anything upfront. So there's absolutely no reason for you not to find the absolute best one that you can. They get paid for the sale. They get paid a percentage of the sale, and then possibly a one-time fee that you'll pay at closing. So for our realtor, it was $300 at closing, and I'll talk more about closing fees later. But my point is, there is no out-of-pocket cost to you immediately to have this realtor, so find the best one that you can. And the final thing that you want to keep in mind when you're looking for a realtor is just because they're a good realtor for someone else doesn't mean that they're going to be a good realtor for you. So you want to find a realtor that specializes in whatever price range that you are going to be in. So if you're looking at $1 million houses, a realtor that specializes in $200,000 houses isn't going to do you much good, and vice versa. So make sure that the realtor that you're picking specializes in your price range. That's very important. The second step is then to contact your lender and get your pre-approval. And this is something that your realtor can help with. A lot of times they'll have their own list of different lenders that they recommend, that they've worked with in the past, that they think are good. Again, it all comes down to what's best for you. But once you pick that business, organization, whatever it is, you'll need to get a hold of them to get your pre-approval. And once again, your pre-approval is usually much higher than what you can realistically afford. So you just want to keep in mind what it is that you can afford. And really all the pre-approval does is open the door for you to go and then look at houses. Which leads to number 3, which is the actual hunt. And I also plan on talking about how offers work because we went through it enough times. So I figure I'll just tell you about our journey. So the very first offer that we made was on a foreclosed home. And of course we had zero experience up to that point. So we didn't really know what to expect. And the realtor kind of warned us a little bit, but of course she was willing to humor it with us. And we were lucky at the time because that particular house did not have any other offers on it. So we put in our offer and we did lowball them a little bit. And they countered our offer with essentially what the house was listed for. So it was basically their way of saying that they weren't going to go any lower. And there was a lot more to it, but that's a whole other story. But the long story short is if you can avoid foreclosures, probably do. Banks are very cold and very mechanical, and asset managers don't really care about you or the house or anything else. All they care about is getting the most money they possibly can from their assets. So try to avoid foreclosures. The second house that we put an offer in on ended up being a small bidding war, not as bad as a lot of them are, but it was a bi-level out in the country and it had a pole barn, which Jordan absolutely loved, and we went into it with our hearts instead of our heads, and because of that we missed a very important detail that ended up coming back to bite us in the butt later. But when we went into the offer, we had to go in with the strongest offer we possibly could. So when there are other offers on a house, and your realtor will walk you through this as well, you have to bid with the intention of winning. I mean, if you want the house, you know? And when you're buying in a seller's market, that's just something you have to expect. So when you make your offer, there is this very long form called your purchase agreement, and you fill out all the information on it, or rather your realtor will fill out all the information on it. So the amount of your offer, and I think we offered $8,000 over listed price for that house. You'll also write in things like what kind of loan you're going for. So we went for a rural development on that house. Any contingencies that you may have. So as a small example of a contingency, during this whole quarantine process, you might put a contingency that the sale will only go through if you can see the house once quarantine ends. And then another big thing that you're going to write on your purchase agreement is the amount that you're willing to put down as your earnest money deposit. So during this whole process, Jordan and I tried to stick to $1,000 earnest money, which I feel like is a bit much for like most smaller areas. I know a lot of people who have bought houses have usually swung a bit lower than that, so $250 or $500. But again, when you're buying in a seller's market, you want to make your offer look as good as possible. So a higher earnest money deposit is going to show how much more serious you are. And basically what that earnest money is money that you pay up front. So as soon as your offer is accepted, if it is accepted, you will then pay that earnest money, and we actually paid it through our realtor. So we made the check out to our realtor's office, and then they took care of the rest. And then you have 10 days, or in our case it was 10 days. I don't know if that's standard. It might be, it may not be. But we had 10 days to then do our inspections and figure out if there was any reason at all we may not want that house. And then if we found anything in that 10 days that scared us away, then we could back out, get our money back, and then move on. If, however, we backed out after that 10 days, then we would lose that $1,000. So you want to make sure to work fast, and it is possible to file an extension on that period of time. So if you needed longer than the 10 days, there was something that you had to look into further, then you could do that, assuming that the seller also signed for that extension, allowing that to happen. So we ended up getting that second offer. They did accept it, and we immediately went into the inspection process. And this was the first inspection that we had gone through, and it was an inspection company that our realtor had actually recommended, and I was very happy with them. We ended up using them a total of 3 times during this whole process, which I'll get to. But the first time they came out, and they had actually pointed out something that I'm kind of embarrassed that we didn't notice the first time we walked through. So in the basement level, it was a walkout basement, but there were 3 other walls that were underground, if you will, because the whole house sat on a hill. They ended up pointing out some pretty substantial foundation issues. So a lot of horizontal cracking, but like the biggest thing was just that the walls were bowing in. And of course, anything to do with foundation is always super scary. You want to be so cautious of that. So there were a lot of other smaller details, just the seller trying to hide different things from us. A small, meaningless one being putting a candle over a hole in the stove. Just small things like that. Along with that huge issue of the foundation, we ended up backing out of that deal. Fortunately got our earnest money back, but we had to walk away from that one. And I guess my big takeaway from that is you need to be able to walk away from an offer. Don't feel like you are so wholly committed to it that you can't walk away if there's something scary. Our third offer was on a house that almost broke me. It was this beautiful ranch home, absolutely enormous, with a finished basement. It had a 3-stall garage and an acre of property, and I'm telling you guys, this house was absolutely beautiful. But this was a very interesting situation because it was an estate, which means that the owner had passed away and it then got passed down to the children who were handling the estate. And it was such a process, guys. It was so unconventional because we went into it and the sellers wanted to do everything verbally. So they wanted us to come to an agreement on price and everything else verbally before we drew up the purchase agreement, which made us uncomfortable. It made the realtor uncomfortable, but of course she was on our side through the whole thing, making sure that we weren't getting screwed over or anything like that. And finally we agreed on a price. Our realtor actually insisted that before we verbally agreed on it, that we wrote out the purchase agreement. And it then took, I believe, a week and a half to get all of the signatures on the form because they didn't have email and didn't believe in like e-signatures, so it all had to be done manually, so it had to be mailed to them and then sent back. And it was such a ridiculous process. And I hope that you never have to deal with that. And if you do, honestly, just walk away from it. Honestly, at this point, I wish we had just walked away from that house to begin with because of everything that we had dealt with. But it was another case of us going in with our hearts instead of our heads. And once again, it bit us in the butt. So finally, we ended up getting the accepted offer. And once again, we had the inspectors come out again, which is a very expensive process, by the way, because I would highly recommend that you get guaranteed termite. And radon is also a very good add-on that you want to your inspection. And everything said and done, each time it was around $600, which they were at least kind enough to discount the following 2 times that we used them, but still, it's expensive. But definitely less expensive than ending up in a house that's going to cost you thousands or tens of thousands. It's scary to think about. So always forego the money for your inspection. It'll save you. So we ended up doing the inspection on this house and everything came back relatively clean. There was nothing too terribly scary, but then the water and the septic came back, which water and septic is always paid for by the seller, just as a side note. It came back, the well was fine, but the septic was no good. It needed to be replaced, which would have ended up costing $15,000 to $20,000. All right, which is a lot of money. We then attempted to counter, and we first asked that they pay for the septic, which is a very reasonable thing to ask for. If you're selling a house, you can't sell a house that doesn't have septic. I mean, I guess technically you can. It's a whole thing, guys. But they refused, so we then asked them to drop the price of the house. You know, we dropped our offer essentially, and they wouldn't take it, so we had to walk away from the house. And I wish I could say that that was the end of it, but we ended up going back again and again to that house, and it seriously haunted me through this whole process, and it broke my heart because I was so sure that that was going to be the house. And looking back now, it was so silly. Don't ever invest yourself into a house, especially when there's absolutely no chance of getting it. Just don't do it. Just save yourself the heartache. So after that, I was pretty defeated. I feel like Jordan was pretty defeated as well, and we did make one other offer on a different house after that one, and neither one of us really had the fight left in us, so it was another case of a bidding war, and we didn't really put forth our best offer on it. I was still surprised to hear that we made it to the last 2, but in the end they went with the second offer instead of ours, which really didn't bum me out as much as you would think, because I was already heartbroken. So I would say probably about a month went by, and that ranch house was still on the market, the one that broke my heart, and we ended up actually putting another offer in on the house just to see if they had changed their mind at all, if they were willing to fix it or at least drop the price, and they still were very firm on their listed price, and we finally gave up on it. And that leads us to the 6th and final offer that we had put in, which was on this house. So we had this house and one other lined up to go look at, and we saw this one first. And as soon as we saw the property and saw the inside of the house and the price and the area, we were pretty much sold. We definitely didn't have the same excitement that we did on like other houses that we put offers in, but I feel like at that point we had been through the process so many times that we had kind of grown numb to it. So even though we knew that this was going to be the house, it wasn't that same giddy feeling that we had when we put in our very first offer. So definitely expect to harden a little bit through the process. It's going to be fun and exciting at first, but then you're going to get so exhausted at looking at so many different houses. We looked at so many houses. We went through so many different offers. It was exhausting. So expect to maybe not be super giddy and excited by the end of it. So with this house, it was another case of a bidding war, but in this time we kind of had our resolve. We kind of got back our backbone a little bit and put forth a really good offer on the house. And we ended up actually changing conventional, which I haven't really talked about that much because all the previous houses before that we had gone rural development. But for this particular house, I mean, we'd been at this for like 6 months already, so we had saved up quite a bit of money, and we ended up deciding that conventional was probably going to be the best course of action. So we switched to conventional with this house, which I think actually ended up getting it for us in the end. Conventional loans are a lot cleaner, there's a lot less to them. Rural development is incredibly complicated, so are FHA and other similar loans. So if you can go conventional, then definitely go conventional. So that was our very long and grueling, tiring, heartbreaking, just downright exhausting journey to finding the house. But that then leads us to number 4, which is financing. So your lender is going to ask for everything from you except for your firstborn child. And even then, maybe. So it would be best just to be mentally prepared and as physically prepared as possible. So you're going to need 2 current pay stubs from each borrower. So because it was myself and my husband, we needed pay stubs for both of us. We also needed the last 2 most recent tax returns, driver's license, social security card, all of our bank statements for all of our accounts. And it's also important to keep in mind during the entire process, so from your pre-approval to the very end, you don't want to make any changes at all to your credit. So don't take out any loans, don't take out any credit cards, or anything else that might change your credit score in any way. Because in the end, that's going to end up extending the process longer than it needs to be. You'll also need to provide proof for any other income that you may be getting. Of course, I had Hollabec design, which ended up being a bit of a pain in the butt. Kind of wish I had waited to open it until after the house buying process, because then I had to provide receipts for everything, bank statements for everything. It's a process. If you get any large deposits, so Jordan ended up getting an inheritance within that 6 months, and we had to prove where that money came from. So it is a bit much. It's a bit much. So definitely be prepared for that. Keep in mind that it's not your lender, okay? They're not the bad guy. They have to do it for their auditors. So it's gonna get annoying, you're gonna get frustrated, but you just have to keep a cool head and remember that they're just doing their job. And finally, once you make it through all of that, that leads to number 5, which is the closing. So you'll need to choose your title agency, and we ended up going through one that was affiliated with our realtor. It just made it a lot easier. And I feel like traditionally, you'll do a dual signing, so both the seller and the buyer yourself will be in the same room together, signing all of the paperwork together. In our particular case, 1, because of quarantine, and 2, I mean, it is an option for people to choose something else. We ended up using 2 different title agencies. So they used their own and we used ours. So you'll go in and you will sign all of your paperwork. So all of your mortgage paperwork, all of your other closing documents, and there's going to be a lot. And you'll also then at that point pay your closing costs. Now, you can ask for closing costs to be covered in your offer. Definitely do that if you're buying during a buyer's market. In a seller's market, probably not the best course of action, especially if there are other offers on the house. If you can pay your own closing costs, pay your own closing costs. But you'll pay them at closing, of course. and you'll get the final amount that you need from your final closing disclosure, which you'll either get from your lender or your realtor, and that will have all of your final information on it. So a breakdown of all your closing costs, and then that final total, as well as what your mortgage payments are going to be month to month. So it's very important information, definitely look over it. But you'll take that final closing amount and take out a cashier's check, and it has to be a cashier check or a wire. And we chose cashier check. Wires kind of make me nervous. It's all just personal preference. But once that's paid, all your paperwork is signed, you are officially homeowners. And in our particular case, we got possession at close, which means that we got the keys to the house at the time of closing. But a lot of cases, that isn't an opportunity for you. It's all something that would be negotiated when you guys are hashing out the offer. All right, guys, but that pretty much sums it up. It's gonna be stressful, but in the end, it is so worth it, and it is worth all the pain that you're gonna go through, trust me. So if there's any questions that you have about my experience or just the experience in general, please let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and it helped you out at all, be sure to leave me a thumbs up. I love seeing those. If you have not already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel because I have a very big goal to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2020. It may seem a bit unreasonable, but what can I say? I'm a dreamer. All right, guys, with that being said, I will see you the next time around.